On episode 222 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, we speak to Mark Monchek, and he's going to tell you how you can create a culture of opportunity within your organization. That's right, folks. It's all about culture today. Are you ready for this? Let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, welcome one, welcome all. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy. And it's so great to be speaking to you yet again. The leader who wants to be that peak performing leader, who wants to perform across those three domains. Leading themselves, leading your team, and our topic of conversation today, leading your organization. And no doubt you've heard that culture is uber important. And in fact, one has said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. You see, culture is what brings your organization together. And in the worst cases, culture is what breaks it apart. The culture of your team and the culture of your organization is going to make or break it. Now, things are ever changing, and your culture needs to ebb, flow, and adapt with those changes as well. And that's why we brought Mark in for this episode, because Mark is all about seizing opportunity when it pops up. And no doubt you, as the leader, you want to do the same as well, right? You want to seize those opportunities because, well, one, they're an opportunity, but two, it's a way to either push your team or your organization ahead further. And that's what this episode is all about. We talk about so many different topics in this show. You know, we talk about what a culture of opportunity actually is and how to keep your team inspired to look for these opportunities when you feel like the cards are stacked against you. And no doubt there are many leaders out there who feel this way right now. We talk about why disruptions are neither good or bad, they just are a reality, such as the disruption going on right now. We talk about how to make remote work, as in be successful. We talk about how to develop that culture of opportunity across teams, across multiple continents. So if you're dealing with distributed teams from, maybe in North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, etc., we talk about how meetings kill the culture of opportunity, but how to also generate loyalty through meetings. So effective use of meetings. And finally, we talk about how to create that culture of opportunity in any organization. Mark is an author, of course, bestseller, Culture of Opportunity, How to Grow Business in the Age of Disruption. He's also the founder and chief opportunity officer or Opportunity Lab, that's his company, which is focused on helping business thrive through disruption. So I feel like this is very timely for everyone. He's worked with a lot of different organizations as I read the list here. Google, Apple, JP Morgan Chase, GE, Goldman Sachs. I'm just going to stop because it just keeps going and going and going. You get the point. Mark is well known, well respected, and the reason why he's worked with all these companies is for that, but he also gets results. So, that is enough for me for the intro. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation about creating a culture of opportunity with Mark Monchek. Mark, my friend, welcome to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, sir. So great to have you here.
Scott, my pleasure. So excited to be with you today.
So, we're talking about creating a culture, organizational culture of opportunity. And I got to ask, like, it's the first time I hear that expression, an organization of opportunity. So, what is a culture of opportunity in the first place before we even dive into how we create one?
There was a quote from Peter Drucker, who was arguably one of the most famous, if not the most famous, management theorists of all time. And he said that culture eats strategy for lunch. And that was always the idea that culture is the dominant force and that strategy must be subservient to culture. So if Peter were alive today, I'd say, Peter, in today's highly disruptive world, when things have changed dramatically just in the last 2 years, culture and strategy must eat lunch together. And the reason I call it culture of opportunity is that we think of a strategy as there's a plan that we're going to set forth about how our business is going to grow from where we are now to the next, let's say, 5 years or 10 years or however. And then there's the culture, which is how the company actually operates, its values, what it believes in, how it feels about itself, how it feels about its customers, and so forth. So often strategies fail because strategies are good for a particular point in time. And that worked when things were stable for periods of decades. But when I wrote my book, Culture of Opportunity: How to Grow Your Business in an Age of Disruption, back in 2017, I thought that was disruption at its height. Fast forward to 2022, we are disruption 5.0 just in the last, 5 years. And today, really, culture of opportunity is more relevant than ever, I think, because you have to have a culture that actually sees opportunities in a moment of adversity, and sees how that adversity could be turned into an opportunity, and is constantly evaluating opportunities that come to the company, deciding which ones you want to launch, which ones you want to put on the side table, and which ones are just not right for you. And the culture is constantly learning, constantly seeking new opportunities, constantly growing and expanding in their awareness about customers, about associates, and the communities they do business in. So that's my short definition of why we call it culture of opportunity.
That is an interesting one definition, but two, take. Because you often find, and I know the Peter Drucker quote, obviously, but you often find that dichotomy between culture and strategy. Culture being more the humanistic side of an organization, where strategy is more of that, ones and zeros, black and white kind of aspect. The manage it. Well, I shouldn't say management side, but more of that, that numbers and all about how we're going to expand and how we're going to launch new products or services and all this stuff. Um, so it's definitely interesting that you want to bring those two together now. And then finally, having that idea of having people looking for the opportunities even in times of extreme difficulty, extreme disruption, as you said, like we're going through, we're still going through right now. It's been crazy the past couple of years, right? Like just madness. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind now as we talk through this is that when I see organizations going through these periods of disruption, it's difficult for people to look, for opportunity. You have to be looking, at things in a positive light. But when there's so much negativity around you, how can you get your people motivated, inspired to look for that positive aspect and find an opportunity to go after and seize it?
Let me give you a very, very recent example, actually, one that's still happening that'll answer your question. So, when 2020 occurred, March 2020, we were about to launch a 5 year strategic planning process with one of our clients. I get a call on March 11th. We must postpone this retreat because we are going to have to lock down our company, and we're going to have to move all of our employees remote except people in the store and people in the distribution center. So that was what you would think of as a negative consequence, right? This is going to have a severe disruption. This is a company that never had people working remotely. It was not something the company accepted. It's not something they were used to. There were few people who did it, but it was not the norm at whatsoever. This is a national retailer of consumer electronics, almost $1 billion company with 1,000 employees with 7 different divisions. So you would think this is a negative experience and this is going to be bad for us. We helped our clients see this is not negative or positive, this is just reality. So when you define reality as this is what's happening, it's not good or bad, it's just the reality. Then you say, okay, what do we do with this reality? So the company had a culture of loyalty and passion for being in this community that supported all kinds of people's personal lives throughout all the 45 years of its existence. So they moved 80% of their people remotely within one day, and the people were so incredibly appreciative of how quickly they did it and how nicely they did it and how well customers continued to get served under extremely dire circumstances. So the ownership and leadership said our two goals are to keep people safe, to keep them functioning, and to serve our customers in the best possible way. That led to this culture of opportunity, which I'll tell you more about in a minute. But I just want to leave you with that specific example. It's not negative or positive. It's what is the reality and where's the opportunity in it for us.
Love that quote. It's not negative, it's not positive, it just is. And I think too many leaders get wrapped around the axle of, is this a positive thing? Is this a negative thing? They end up into what I refer to as the blame game. Some often, oh, whose fault is it that this is happening? Someone's got to pay. Someone's got to be accountable. But reality is, it's the reality. And I love that because that actually puts you into a mindset of being proactive now, vice reactive, much along the lines of what you said about that company, in that they were able to quickly move their workforce to remote. They were quickly able to transition to keep, providing services, goods and services to their customers, and basically almost make it seem, seamless overnight. Now, I'm sure there was plenty of bumps along the roads, but guess what? They're able to make that pivot pretty quick. And why? Do that mentality of it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. Love it.
Yeah, and Scott, it's bad either because we didn't expect it or because we didn't want it. That's why we call it bad, right? If we wanted and expected it, then we call it good, right? So in this particular situation, the company did, and this company is called Adorama, and I'm using its name because it is a iconic New York brand name, and I'm very proud of being affiliated with the company for 17 years as an advisor, and I so appreciate what they've done through a difficult time. So they started doing things that they'd never done before. They called customers and they were told, call your customers and ask them how they're doing. Just ask them, how are you doing? Are you safe? Is there anything we can do for you? Didn't try to sell them anything. This is in their several commercial divisions. And the customers, you're calling me to tell me, ask me if I'm okay, if I'm safe. And it was just so deeply appreciated. Then we were hearing from customers that we can't get PPE equipment. We can't get hydroxyl generators or various things to keep the company safe. And our client was never in that business. However, they had relationships in China, they had relationships with different distributors. They were able to get PPE equipment and various other related equipment, and they were able to sell it because they were able to get it and they had distribution channels to actually do it. But they only heard it because they were asking customers, "Oh, what's going on? How are things in your community?"
That's just being a good person in the end, really. Checking in, like, hey, how can I help you? Oh, no, I don't deal with that, but I know someone who does, and that's exactly what a person in a neighborhood, when a storm. We recently this past weekend had a big storm come through, and it was lots of damage and stuff like this. Not where I live specifically, a bit further north of me, but you see it in the community, people coming out, how can I help? I was camping with my friend who's had some damage on his property. I'm like, hey, how can I help? Yeah. Oh, you got a big branch, good chunk of a tree down. cool. You want me to get my chainsaw? Like, I know someone who can, lend us, XYZ tool. He's like, yeah, do you mind? I'm like, no, I'll go do it. So I drove 45 minutes each way to grab my chainsaw and the tools and go back another hour up to his place and got my, my man fix in by chopping up some wood. But, it's the moral of the story is you're there, you're helping, you're finding opportunities to help. So I really like that story that you brought forth to us.
Yeah, and it started kind of changing the whole relationship between the associates and the company. Because what happened was when the associates moved remotely, the company was like, all right, are they going to perform properly? Are they going to really feel motivated? Are they going to be able to work in such an independent fashion? What they found, Scott, is in the 3 hours they were saving commuting, 2 of those 3 hours went back to the company because they felt, hey, finally I can go to a doctor's appointment. I can go to my kid's soccer game, or I can, actually be out in nature when I never did before. So there was a whole different balance and more of a collaborative relationship between associates and the company because they saw this as the reality. Okay, what's the opportunity? Opportunity was employees have more flexibility, employees have more ability to do their work when they want to, and the company got actually great productivity and better communication was actually happening with customers and with their teams than they ever had before.
That's amazing. I love hearing stories like that because I often get pushback. Oh, remote work can't work. Uh, Distributed work settings don't work, and I call bull. Like we can still develop teams, we can still develop relationships, we can still have communication, great communication, without everyone being physically present in the same room. It's just different. It's just slightly different, and I call bull. And I'll give you an example. Um, Not too long ago, about 2 weeks ago, I think, 3 weeks ago now. Yeah, about 3 weeks ago now, I came down with COVID, and I had to isolate myself away from my family into my basement. But I had my work computer home with me, and I was like, my deputy. So by day, I'm not sure if you follow me that close or not, but by day, I'm actually a senior Canadian Army officer. So I work for the Canadian Armed Forces. Um, and I was talking to my deputy, and he's like, "So you want me to go all to all your meetings and stuff?" I'm like, "No, we got remote dial-in. I'm there. I'm still effective. I will make this remote work." And that's what we did for 7 days. We made it work. So I really like hearing stories like that. Going after those opportunities.
Scott, it can work. What I think is different and when it works the best is when the companies understand they have to be much more intentional about how people work, when they work, and where they work, right? So yes, people can work remotely. However, some people are very good at it. The people who are self-disciplined, the people who really have that motivation and that self-structure. The people who are not good at it are people who are used to structure of going into the office. They need the physical space. They need the relationship with other people. So we had to help our clients create a more intentional way of working remotely and in a hybrid fashion. Because as people started coming back to the office, most people wanted that flexibility. They actually want to be in the office, but they want to be in the office when other people are in the office and to do the things that you can't do remotely. So we started a program called Share Lab, which is really about three things: helping associates feel cared about, functioning, and communicating effectively with their peers, with their customers, and with the company itself. And so in our share labs, we actually got information about what associates needed to work remotely or to work in a hybrid fashion. We found out about what customers were saying, all kinds of things, Scott, that were never communicated before when people were going in the office because there was no structure to do that. So to give you a really specific example, we had one gentleman recently, a very, very top performer who was working mostly remotely, and he just wasn't really doing very well. He didn't have that internal structure. So his manager said, I want you to come in the office 4 days out of the 5, and I will come in the first week and I'll be with you to feel that I care about. He did that. The guy worked much, much better. Then this gentleman, the week later said, I'm coming in 2 days. I'm loving it. People are there. The other 2 days, nobody's in the office. So I said to his manager, you know what? There are a few people in the office, but not his peers. Why don't you get him a laptop instead of a desktop and do like a co-working space in the company where sit him near other people who are in that day, which might not be his regular peers in another department, but at least there's some camaraderie and there's some communication. So he's coming in to at least to be with 3 or 4 people rather than to sit by himself with nobody next to him. And they were able to adjust really quickly. And now the person is actually working in a way that works even better because that culture of opportunity is constantly searching for new opportunities, big or small, like that one.
So the moral of the story I'm hearing from you in that story is don't just immediately give up because it's not working. You know, that the supervisor could be like, "Oh, I can't remote work," then he's useless, or "Oh, he can't remote work, so come in all the time." And everyone has to come in. You know, those extremes, right? That we tend to go towards, all or nothings. But rather, okay, that didn't work. Let's look. Okay, how might we tweak it? How might we tweak it a little bit more? How might we tweak it a little bit more? And constantly looking for, as you say, those opportunities to improve the situation, to improve the process, to improve whatever it might be. Now, I got a question. Um, I run a Facebook group, a free Facebook group out there, as well as a mastermind community. And I had a question come up, or actually a scenario come up that you may be able to help me with and actually help someone with. And I posed a question in our free Facebook group. I said, what is your biggest leadership challenge right now? And one of the members popped up saying, about remote work, but working with teams in multiple time zones across multiple continents. God. So, how might we find the opportunity to really bring synergy to these teams and work in a cohesive, company when we got people that are like 8 hours away from us in time difference or 6 hours, etc. Some in Europe, some are in North America, some might be in South America, etc. What's the best way to develop that culture of opportunity for those teams?
Oh, that's a great challenge, Scott. So there's the mindset challenge, and then there's the actual logistical challenge, which has a technological solution to it. So the mindset challenge is we need to find a solution that is the greatest good for the greatest number. And in that mindset, right, there's some people who are going to get a better solution and some people who are not going to get as perfect a solution. But if the greater good is the value system, then we got to say, all right, what's the greatest good for the greatest number? Knowing that we can't have the ideal situation for everybody, people understand that that is the value and that some people will get the greatest good on one situation and not on the other. If they realize that that's the intent of the company, at least that mindset of collaboration and teamwork is there. The logistical challenge is you have to ask, probably through a survey, and there are apps to do this. Okay, Scott, you are in Canada, you are in the Eastern Standard Time Zone. What is your ideal range of when you best want to meet with this particular team? Then we ask somebody in Singapore and somebody in Vancouver and somebody in Hungary. And then we've got the data that shows, okay, these are the ideal times. Probably works really well for the guy in Hungary, works somewhat well for the guy in Toronto, not so good for the guy in Singapore, right? But at least we have tried to get the greatest good for the greatest number, and some other things will favor the guy in Singapore.
Yeah, it
Does
makes
that
a
make
lot of sense.
sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And there's going to be gives and takes across the board, right? For every part of member of that team. Would you suggest like, okay, let's develop a standard standing meeting, or meetings times so that people then can work their schedule around that. So you pick that, you look at the different time zones and when people would prefer operating and say, okay, we got this 1 hour window Mondays and Thursdays, maybe it's 8 a.m. Eastern, or maybe it's 6 a.m. Eastern, and then it's like, you know, 8 or 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. Like pick those two windows and then like, okay, now you guys can work around those periods. Something like that be helpful for the team leaders out there.
I think having a standard meeting time is good for stability, for predictability. If you want the greatest good for the greatest number, then what you would do is you have a standard time, let's say quarter by quarter. So in quarter one, we're picking a 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. That is good for some people, not as good for others. Quarter two, we're going to pick an 8 p.m. on Wednesday. That is better for the guy in Singapore, but not so good for the guy in Vancouver. However, you're saying, all right, you know what? We're going to do the solution quarter by quarter. So every region gets some preference quarter by quarter. You have predictability, but you also have that flexibility to help people feel cared about no matter where in the world they're operating from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that. Actually, change it up. Make it fair for everyone. Everyone feels included. Valued. Okay, and that predictability. As I think people want that the most, right? The understanding, the predictability. Like, okay, this quarter I got my time slot. Next quarter, I need to make some changes in my personal life because my work schedule is going to shift a little bit. And that could be done as long as it's predictable. They know it's upcoming. People need to change their lives and stuff like this. So it definitely helps.
Well, they want predictability, but they also want flexibility. So how do you
Yeah.
balance those two
Yeah.
things, right?
100%.
Uh, when you want to find out what the quality and culture and the attitude in a company is, if it's a knowledge company where you're basically knowledge workers, right? It's not a factory situation. But a company where we have a lot of meetings, ask people, so how do you like your meetings? And Scott, I got to tell you, very few people say, I love meetings. It's exciting. We get so much work done and I'm so inspired. They usually say, oh, we had way too many meetings and they're really not that, they're boring. Why is that? One, because there's not intentionality about the human side of meetings. So they don't open up on the human side, they don't close up on the human side, and there's often not permission to say the thing that nobody else maybe wants to hear. So the way that we solve that in our company with our clients, we open up on the human side. We have a round robin check in. So our team of 5 people rotate to opening the meeting. So you might be on our team, Scott, and you might say, I'm opening the meeting. I'm going to tell you the most exciting book that I've read in the last couple of weeks that really inspired me and why this is. What is your most exciting book, Mark? And then we get that conversation going. Well, what is inspiring us intellectually or creatively or what have you? Uh, Another person is going to talk about they want to do a meditation, want to bring in a 5 minute meditation, get people to be quiet and really present. So we get everybody to contribute to open the meeting in some kind of personal way. And I got to tell you, the meetings become so much more productive. And you might take up 15 minutes to start. The rest of the meetings really just fly by because people are energized and they're connected in a human way. And we have a culture of say whatever you need to say, as long as it's in a respectful way. Whatever it is, you could say anything as long as it's said with respect. And when you get that openness, you get a challenging the reality, and then that culture of opportunity happens where somebody says, I think we should stop doing this. It's not helping anybody. Oh, no, we've been doing this for a long time. Well, what are the results of what we're doing? So when people challenge each other in a respectful way in meetings, they become very inspiring and very dynamic. People want to go to the meetings because the meetings actually help them solve a problem, help them feel connected.
Oh, wow. I love that. I have a huge heartache with meetings as a leader. One part of me says, the positive aspect of meetings is I get to be with my team and check in on my team and stuff like this. But the second part is productivity killers. Truly are. They're productivity killers, especially when they're not run right. However, I like that part that you mentioned about, giving some ownership of the meeting to the team members and bringing that, it's something new because we all know, especially these standing meetings, we all know, okay, this is what's going to get discussed. And oh, Dave over there, we know Dave's going to go on a preaching rant for about 15 minutes about his department and how important it is and all this stuff. We get in these mundane routines, but adding that aspect, kind of changes it up. And I like that. I really like that. That's a great actual item for for the leader out there who's listening to this and in their meetings. I'm going to add something to that to mine, and see how my team on our weekly meeting, how they respond. So thanks for that one.
You're welcome, Scott. And the person who opens the meeting with the check-in, they often facilitate the entire meeting. So it's not just they got the opening, but they get a chance to facilitate. So you get different facilitation styles, different energies. And we also have
Mm.
a bandwidth check-in at the very beginning, after the kind of connective check-in that I just shared with you. The next one is, okay, how's your bandwidth, Scott? And what that does is it gives everybody a chance to voice how overloaded they are, or maybe they have a little extra bandwidth. That, Scott, I can take something off your plate because you know what? I actually have less things to do because I completed a huge project. I don't have a new one coming on. I've got a few extra hours. Can I take something off your plate, Scott? Really? I had no idea. Like, that, thank you. So that bandwidth discussion mixed with the check-in kind of gives a lot of collaboration structure to the meetings.
Yeah, that bandwidth one is crucial. Actually, I do something very similar. I don't call it the bandwidth, but I get my team to tell me, what they're up to. I don't know exactly 100% everything they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Like I'm not in their shorts. If I did, I'd be micromanaging. That's not my style, right? So I say, hey, what's going on? What do you have working on? And actually, one of my team members today was like, I don't have a whole lot. I can help out with that project. I can jump on that. I can take that one there. We're like, hey, and then it turned into a little bit of a joke because they're all the same themes. We're like, oh, you're that guy now. But that was the point was though, that person had the ability to pick up some slack and not overload the rest of the team. Um, and it enables that, that sense of camaraderie now, that trust. It's so many great ways. And again, back to the theme of this interview, this podcast, I should say, is opportunity. He sees the opportunity to take something on. One, take something on, but I would suggest more importantly, two, take something off someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And then Scott, for the learning component, because every meeting should have a learning component and should have a different kind of learning component every time. So toward the end of the meeting, we ask two questions that are rotating. They're different every time. So one might be, what is most inspiring you, and what is most troubling you? Another set might, what is your biggest learning, and what is it you most want to learn? What is your biggest insight, and what is it you would most like to have an insight about? What are your customers most excited about? What are your customers most frustrated about? So we mix questions that are very provocative and thought provoking, and then that gives a lot of learning happening in each meeting.
Oh, I love those generative questions. Absolutely. And it also humanizes everyone, right? To show that, maybe the thing that inspires them most something personal, or the thing that is, troubling them the most is, something personal, and humanizes people. And then as a leader, you go, oh, wow, like, I didn't realize that was going on in your life. Excuse me. Maybe I shouldn't give this big project that I have sitting here in the corner ready to go to you right now because one, you did your bandwidth check in and you're overloaded and stressed out, and two, you have issues at home with your children, etc. Okay, maybe it's not the time for you to take this on right now. Maybe it's time to give it to Dave over here. So I really like
And
that.
Scott, when you do that, the depth of loyalty, the depth of appreciation, it creates uh, instead of a vicious cycle, it creates a virtuous circle. There's a generosity circle that becomes part of the company's culture when you really humanize the experience and you really give people a chance to ask for what they want and offer what they have to offer.
Absolutely. Now, Mark, we talked about a whole lot of different stuff. And I'm sure we've answered this question, but I would like to get a little bit more formal response from you. Is like, I assume that you have some kind of framework or some kind of ideology sequence or something along the lines of creating that opportunistic culture in an organization. So, from you, how might leaders go about doing that?
Well, our mission is to build resilient companies with shared abundance. And we do that through our three programs: strategy, leadership, and culture. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we think that you need to have a strategic culture, a culture of opportunity, where the culture develops an emergent strategies that resonates with what's happening in the world. And our programs, as you can see by how we run meetings, right? The meetings are very strategic because they have a result that has high impact, but it's a culture of collaboration, of generosity, of high level of communication. And we're learning leadership skills at every single meeting and in everything that we do. So we help our clients develop a resilient strategy with shared abundance. And then we teach leaders how to be leaders that lead companies that are creating abundance for their customers, for their associates, and for the communities they do business in, through that culture of opportunity. And the Share Lab is our culture program. So we think that strategy, leadership, and culture have to all, work together. And the first start is just a conversation with us about what's the problem you're trying to solve, what's the result you're trying to get, and what have you tried that hasn't worked. And through that discussion, we understand the mindset. It's very often, Scott, it's the mindset of the company that is causing the problem not to be solved. Because most problems in business have a solution. It's you got to shift the mindset from competition to collaboration, from I to we, from scarcity to abundance. And when you make those mindset shifts, often the problems just get solved through that different type of dialogue.
No, you definitely got to have the conversation first. Mark, my friend, this has been a eye-opening conversation, no doubt. Before we wrap up, I do got a couple of last questions for you. And the first being a question I ask all the guests here at the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. And as according to you, Mark Monchek, what makes a great leader?
Great leader knows her or his purpose for serving, why you're serving, why you're here on earth, what is it you're here to do. So it creates a sense of service to the world itself and through your particular organization. Uh, Leaders understand that it's the collective wisdom of the group that has the most power, not the smarts or the knowledge of any individual, but it's really the collective wisdom that really, really has tremendous power. And it's the openness to feedback, to continually asking, Scott, how can I serve you better? Tell me what you'd like from me that maybe you're not getting. So there's a constant dialogue about what is going well and what is it maybe that we want to change.
That's a great answer. And a final question of the show: how can people find you? How can they follow you? It's all about you now.
Well, we'd love people to come to our website, opplab.com, opplab.com. We have a lot of free resources. We have podcast appearances that I've done with other podcasts, and yours will be on there shortly. We have a free ebook, and we host, I know you host mastermind communities, which is phenomenal Facebook groups. Every month, we have a community that we've developed since the beginning of the pandemic called Opportunity Community. It is usually the third Thursday of every month from 4 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. You can sign up for it for free. And we really help companies thrive through disruption by meeting other leaders from around the world and having kind of these deep dive dialogues like you and I are having today.
That's amazing. Absolutely love it. And for the listeners, always, it's easy for you. Just go to leaddon'tboss.com/222. And the links are there in the show notes for you at the bottom. Mark, my friend, thank you for taking time in your busy schedule, talking to me, but most importantly, the leader at there today.
Scott, thank you. It's a great pleasure.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend, win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.